We're starting the show with a very special guest. He's author of Douglass versus Marx, The Battle for America's Soul, referring to Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. He is K. Carl Smith, and we welcome him on Saving the American Dream. Good morning, K. Carl.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
That's
a pleasure to have you here on the show. We're kind of excited about this topic. It kind of is interesting contrast with me and my opponent because I line up with Frederick Douglass and she lines up with Karl Marx. And that is Representative Lauren Underwood, by the way.
Okay.
So we are very glad to have you on. We know that there's a pastor's Liberty Conference here in Illinois coming up. And, tell us about that. Tell us about your involvement. And then tell us about really the background of the several books that you've authored. And like in particular, we're very interested in the debate between Douglass and Marx because it seems like that is what is really happening right now, real time America, in politics, in our schools, and every place else.
Well, the Liberty Pastor Training is a vision of Paul Blair. Many of you may recognize that name. He's a former offensive lineman for the Chicago Bears. And so Paul had the vision, and he's a pastor himself, to start a Liberty Pastors Training because a lot of pastors just got into the culture, into politics than they should be, and how to push back against a culture that's pushing God out of the culture. How do we put that back in place and be where we need to be as a nation? So Paul had a tremendous vision to get that going, and I'm happy to be a part of that. We'll be in Chicago the 27th. Well, it starts the 28th to the 30th, and I'm one of the presenters there, so I'm really, really happy about that. You asked me about the book that I wrote. I've written 4 books, and all my books are focused on really the life and the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. I am a huge Frederick Douglass fan, and did not start off that way. I'm from Alabama, and I grew up as a staunch Democrat, and then when I came across the liberty message of Frederick Douglass and his writings, it turned my thinking right side up, in particular when Douglass made the comment about the 3/5 clause. I'm a graduate of the historical black college, Alabama A&M University, and I was taught in college by my history professor, and it's still being taught today, by the way, that the 3/5 clause meant that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. And when I read what Frederick Douglass had to say about it, he turned my thinking right side up. And ever since then, I've been on a mission. I've read everything Douglass has written. I've read everything written by Douglass in terms of his autobiographies, all 3 of them. I've read probably every biography in print, including children's books. I've read every academic paper I could get my hand on. I was just obsessed with his life, but mostly with his arguments. A lot of people don't see Douglass as a thinker. I mean, in my opinion, Douglass is the greatest sophisticated thinker when it comes to liberty and U.S. Constitution. And people don't see him that way. They don't refer to him as a philosopher. They refer to him as a former slave. He had something to do with abolition of slavery, and he met Abraham Lincoln. But there's more to him about that. And so I'm so happy that I was able to come across and become obsessed with that, the writings of Douglass. The latest book that I wrote that I'm really excited about is entitled Douglass versus Marx. And here's the background to this. Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx were contemporaries. They were both born in 1818, but they never met and they never corresponded with one another. But these 2 men looked at the world in terms of the oppression in the world and came up with 2 opposing worldviews on how to address and overcome the injustice in our world. And the basics to it is basically this. Karl Marx advocated and believed that our rights come from government. Douglass believed and wrote that our rights come from God. Karl Marx called for the elimination of religion. Frederick Douglass said no. Karl Marx said religion has a way of making people docile, where they don't want to fight for anything on earth. They want to live a holy life, not get involved in anything, and get the reward in heaven. And Douglass said, no, my faith, my religion inspired me to be a warrior for justice. And of course, Karl Marx believed that parents should not be involved in the education of their children. The state should take care of all that. And Douglass wrote about and spoke about parental school choice. So when you really get into the writings of Douglass really defeats the arguments of Marxism and communism and socialism before those words were ever invented. I make that point by saying this. Douglass wrote extensively about the nature of slavery. I'm talking about the plantation slavery. He wrote about that extensively. But when you study Douglass and study Marxism, the techniques of oppression used by the plantation slave master are identical to the techniques of oppression used by a slave government, communism, Marxism, socialism.
So, Carl, can you tell us what did Douglass think about America and the Constitution and our founding fathers?
Well, at first, when Douglass escaped from slavery, he was not much of a reader, he said, and he was mentored by a guy named William Lloyd Garrison. And the Garrisonians believed that the Constitution was a pact with the devil, and it promoted slavery. And Douglass believed that. But Douglass did something very interesting. He sat down one day and read the Constitution for himself. He read the Federalist Papers. He read Lysander Spooner's The Unconstitutionality of Slavery, and he had this epiphany. Douglass said, wait a minute. The Constitution is not a pro-slavery document. The word slavery is not even in the Constitution. And so Douglass had a totally different turn when he started becoming more critical-minded about what he was hearing and started reading for himself. And he referred to the Constitution as a glorious liberty document on many occasions. And wow. So he had admiration for the Founding Fathers and respect for the U.S. Constitution. A man, if anybody could have a hate on America because he was a slave, Douglass should have gone toward Marxism, but he didn't. He didn't embrace the ideology of that Marxism teaches, revolution. Doug said in his third autobiography, Douglass said, I'm not a revolutionist. I'm a reformer. Let's keep the best that we have and make things better, to include the Constitution. Let's just live by what's on paper. And so Douglass is this man who's left us a massive literary legacy. He wrote all his speeches out, all his lectures, he wrote them out. And thank God for that, because now we have his literary legacy to refute the lies and the false narrative of Marxism, of socialism.
We have about 2 minutes left. Can you tell us what was his belief about going back to Africa or integrating here in America? And was he considered to be a leader of the blacks in the Republican Party at the time?
Douglass is the father of the civil rights movement. And I would say that he was a mentor to a lot of blacks in politics. The first 7 blacks to serve in the U.S. Congress were black Republicans, mostly out of the South.
Right.
Their political mentor was Frederick Douglass. And when I read this story about these black men, the first black Republicans, first black to serve in the Congress were black Republicans, I said to myself, those guys were Frederick Douglass Republicans. And that name kind of stuck with me, and that's how I refer to myself.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. I mean, I could probably spend a whole weekend with you talking about this stuff, maybe longer. So we're going to keep you over the next break. We still have about a minute left. Okay. So I did want to see, just there's so much stuff here, but he was an advisor to Abe and other presidents. So can you tell us quickly about that, and then we'll come back after the break and dive into anything else here. So.
Frederick Douglass had 0 days of formal schooling. He was a slave for 20 years. He ended up being an advisor to 5 Republican presidents: Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison.
Yeah, I mean, that's just amazing. I guess one of the things when we come back is, why don't we know this? Why is it not taught? I mean, you kind of alluded to that a little bit in your intro. It's like, where is it going? Why is it not there? We should all know this, right?
Yes.
We'll be right back. Jim Marter, Gretchen Fish, Fritz, and K. Carl Smith.
And I'm proud to be an American. back to the show about faith, family, and freedom. You're listening to Saving the American Dream with Jim Marter on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Jim Marter with Gretchen Fritz, my co-host, and we're here with K. Carl Smith, and we're talking about his book, Two World Views, One America, Douglass versus Marx, and we want to get back into it. I mean, you had some fascinating things going on, and we want to dive right into it.
Yeah, in regards to the book, what people need to understand, this is really not a history book. This book is a tactical manual. A history book tells you what happened. A tactical manual prepares you and guides you to victory. So this book, it guides you to victory, how to advance the cause of liberty, and how to defeat Marxism. And the book has 31 debates. Remember now, Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass never met. But I thought about it, well, they were contemporaries. They both wrote about oppression in the world. Let's put them in the same room and properly introduce them to one another and see what they have to say. Mm. And so the content of each debate is based on what they believe. It's based on what they wrote. It's based on what they said. We're not making this stuff up because we have source documents that's listed in the back of the book where we got all of their comments from. So they're dialoguing. They're debating different things. At the end of every debate, there is a reflection. There's moral of the story. What's the takeaway? There are talking points. These are talking points you can use in your conversation when you have this conversation with people about that particular topic, or that particular concern that they're debating. There are at least 5 discussion questions after each debate, and there are guided answers to those questions after each debate. So it's really a built-in curriculum. But what it is, what people are doing, it's a book that you don't read and put it on the shelf. A lot of people are keeping that book with them because they want to sure they masters Douglass's arguments to help them become better messengers of liberty. So when that Marxists come to your kitchen table around Thanksgiving time, where you invite them over, now you know how to engage them and really educate them about the value of liberty versus the value of government control. We call it value of government control, but why liberty is so important, and you're referencing what Douglass had to say. For example, one of the things that they're going to debate is the whole idea about free speech. Of course, Marxists believe that free speech got to be controlled. If it's a speech that's going to tear down the regime, you got to control that free speech. So, in the way it ends, Douglass will say something like, well, that's why, Carl, on such and such date, I gave this speech and I said this. And every debate has that. There's one that I love that I wrote. Is if you don't think about Karl Marx never really had a real job in his life. He relied on his business partner's angle to take care of him financially. Karl Marx didn't work. And so in this debate, Douglass challenges Marx regarding his lack of work ethic. And Douglass said to him, any man that does not fulfill his financial obligation to provide for his family has no business trying to lead a nation.
Amen.
And so every debate ends with a mic drop from Douglass. Now, here's the thing.
Right.
Douglass crushes Marx in all the debates. Not because we rigged it that way, not because we diminish anything Karl Marx had to say. He won it because, number one, Douglass is right. And number two, we have the value of being in 2026. We can look at the 20th century and we can see that wherever Marxism was implemented, it has always failed. It always caused misery, poverty, collapsed economic system, and mass murders. Mm-hmm. That's why Douglass is winning. Yeah. That's why he wins. And that book, the book is, we're going to put this book in the hand of, our goal is to put the book in the hand of pastors, students, and parents and grandparents. Because the last line of defense to save our republic is with parents and grandparents. We can't rely on our social institutions to do this. We have to do it. But you got to equip that child with something they can fight with. Can I tell a quick story? What happened with this guy named KJ?
Absolutely. Yep.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, KJ is a student here in Alabama, and this happened last year. But KJ had been reading the book Douglass versus Marx. Okay, and in his history class, the professor stood up and said the Constitution is a pro-slavery document, and he mentioned that the 3/5 clause was about blacks being 3/5 of a human being. Again, I was taught that in college. But KJ had been reading Douglass versus Marx. So KJ respectfully pushed back against the teacher and brought in what Douglass had to say about it. Make a long story short, KJ won the argument.
That's
with
right.
the professor. And he won the classroom. Because now other students in the classroom want to know more about Frederick Douglass's liberty message.
That is awesome.
And so that's what we have to do. While we're fighting our school system, I think what we have to do, Jim, we got to make sure our children are prepared to fight in this ideological battle before they step into the classroom.
So we've got about 4 minutes left. What are some of the other topics that you cover in the book?
All the claims of Marxism: religion, immigration, who controls the school, equity. DEI is one of the topics in there because Douglass spoke about that. Now you got me.
Yeah. Actually, let's focus in on that one because DEI is, like in my school district, Oswego, Illinois, the Marxists are in control, doubling down, teaching this nonsense in our schools right here in the 14th district, Oswego, Illinois. So what does Frederick Douglass, the FDR Republicans, have to say about that?
Well, you go back to Douglass's speech again. Everything in the book is based on what Douglass said, what Karl Marx said. This book is not a commentary, and so Douglass gave a speech. I think what a black man wants. I believe that's the name of the speech. And Douglass talked about stop treating blacks like they're a special class of citizen. He said you didn't do anything special for the Irish. He said, leave them alone and mind your own business. If the apple falls from the tree, then let it fall. But black folks have the ability to take care of themselves. They don't need the government to interfere and take care of them. Douglass said, because the question they asked Douglass was, he said, what shall we do with the Negro? Meaning that after slavery is over with, you got 4 billion blacks going to be free from slavery. They said, what shall we do with the Negro? Douglass said, what do you mean, what shall you do with the Negro? Don't you think you've done enough? You made him a slave, right? He said, stop playing mischief with his life. He said, leave him alone and mind your own business.
Amen.
Stop coming up with programs that are going to separate him to create animosity among the races. So Douglass wrote about this stuff. So that's why Douglass is so important, because no one knows the arguments of Douglass. That's what the book does. It equips you with the argument of Douglass and how he defeated Marx in those debates, and how you can win your arguments in your conversation with people you're engaged in now.
And it's so important to
you go to city council.
It's so important to hear that from a person of color. You know that you're not the opposite race arguing that blacks don't need any help. You're the same race arguing leave them alone, let them do what they're going to do.
Well, more important than that, Frederick Douglass is saying this. Here's a man who was born below poverty.
Right. Into
slavery is below poverty.
Yeah.
So Frederick Douglass is saying this. And I didn't say this in terms of a tidbit about his life. Don't you know when Douglass passed away, 1895, he had $300,000 in savings?
Wow.
In today's money, that's over $10 million.
Right.
That's amazing.
So what I learned is by studying Douglass, you have to apply yourself. And so there are some things that Douglass believed in as part of his action plan, that if you repeat that action plan, you also become successful. And basically what he did was this. He discovered his God-given purpose. He discovered his passion. He took that obsession and he made it a profession, period. That's all he did.
That is awesome. So tell us, we only got 40-some seconds left, but tell us about the upcoming conference. You're going to be there. You're going to be instructing in this, and let us know. Yeah,
it's going to be it's going to be the 27th through the 30th in Oak Brook.
Yep.
give the website to get the book. That's kcarl.company.site. kcarl.company.site. SITE.
All right. Well, we're so happy to have you on here. Thank you very much for being with us, K. Carl. And yeah, folks, go out there and get that book. I've got a copy. I've already started reading it, and it's fascinating.
If you love life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you're in the right place. More of Saving the American Dream with Jim Marter on AM 560, The Answer.